So hi guys, this is another off the cuff, I didn't write notes video, and I might sound a little bit different than normal, a little more nasally. There's like some kind of summer cold going around right now, and I think I'm getting it, which sucks, but such is life. But I've made videos in the past about my adventures being self-employed and my learning curve, and it's been a while since I've made one realistically like this. I've done some where I give a little bit of advice here and there, but this is just gonna be like me spewing. I'm doing a Michie Rambles over like an art rambles thing here, but I've noticed that this past summer, the summer of 2019, has been extremely hard for so many people, for so many self-employed people. This summer, I've seen every walk of life being affected. I've seen YouTubers, streamers, commission artists, freelance artists, industry artists, the whole cake and caboodle. It's been really hard on them, and it's also been hard on me. And it's odd saying that, because if you guys have been here for a while, you know that summers, ironically, were always my best time of year. That was when almost always, for some weird reason, I would have my YouTube videos blow up. That would be when I would get most of my commission work. The last year was when I did my first convention. This year I'm doing a second one. Summers for me were always a very hot ticket item. And it had been that way for a very, very long time. It also was big for me because back in the day, back when I was in college and I was working a lot, I always had summer break because I didn't do school during the summer. So when I was just working, I had more time to focus towards art and things. And this is also a big deal because this is the first summer where Cody and I aren't moving from place to place. If you guys didn't know, our old living situation had us pretty much every 6 months we were bouncing between houses. And it was always hard, especially in the summer, because one of those houses was a very, very, very old house. We are still very grateful, so don't take it as, a rude thing, because, having a place to live is very, very nice. But it was very old. They had terrible bug problems no matter what we did. It was always so hot because they didn't have air conditioning. They had a swamp cooler from the 70s. And we would always end up with our electronics nearly frying every year. But even through all of that, we still got a lot of work done. Even though, finances weren't the best. And so then we skip to this year, and it's been a really big year of discovery for both my husband and I, and a lot of my friends, a lot of my art friends. And sometimes when you're self-employed and you see other people who are self-employed who have figure quote made it, and you end up comparing yourself, which you really shouldn't do. No one should do, but it's human nature. We do it. And you always wonder, you're like, oh, why am I not there? What am I doing wrong? Da, 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 da. Or there are cases where you will have an extremely high skill level, but not a big following. And then you'll look at someone who has a less skill level, and then you're like, what am I doing wrong that they're doing right? And it brings you down and then less negativity. And one of my friends recently told me about how almost everyone, if you've been on YouTube and you peruse YouTube like I do, you would have heard about seasonal affective disorder, which is sad. And that is when, mostly when it gets winter and the sun is gone, you have it to where people get extremely depressed because they can't really leave their houses. And I never understood that. I knew it was a thing. I've taken psychology classes, I don't have a degree in it, but I've heard of it, I've studied it, and it does make complete sense. But in the same boat, I never really experienced that in the winter. I've had a couple of depressive episodes, but it was also having to do with the situation that I was in, so says my doctor. And so this summer, I was very confused. I was confused because in June, my depression came back full force, nearly full force. And I had to keep telling myself, which is a very bad thing to do. I'm like, what? Why is this happening? You know, I'm not in the toxic situation I was in before. We have a roof over our head. We can afford food in our fridge. We can pay our bills. Why is this happening again? I thought that this was done. I know that's like really dark to say, but it was hard. And it also happened to do with a burnout. It was a combination of a few things for me. And in doing so, I ended up getting nearly no work done in June. I got some client work done. I got a couple of commissions done. I hardly got my Patreon stuff done, which that does get to me a lot harder than a lot of other things, because with Patreon, I also don't promote it very often, but with Patreon, because I am being supplemented this income every single month, I feel like they definitely need to get more of my attention because they are supplementing me every month guaranteed. And there's my air conditioner. Sorry about that. I swear, every chance I get, I'm scatterbrained. But it was very hard. And I didn't even... I was just so exhausted and so burnt out. And I had my first real experience with burnout. One of my first videos that I made was talking about how, you know, ways to fight art block and how I don't believe in burnout. And it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, young Michie, you naive little bean. You're going to finally experience, because I couldn't work. I was in so much pain. I was so tired and I was so depressed. And it was so hard. And the problem is, if you work an industry job, or if you work a finger quote real job, as people like to say, you know, you can't exactly go to your boss and be like, burnout, don't want to go to work today. You'll lose your job. You know, that being said, I know a lot of people who take mental health days because mental health days are extremely important, but they can't say it's a mental health day. You know, they have to say, I'm sick, or I'm not feeling well, or there's an emergency, but you can't take an entire month off. You can't do this and that. And with a lot of YouTube, you know, you see the bigger people, the bigger fish, you know, and how they tell you like, oh, well, if you need a break, take a break. And it gets to a point where you wonder, like, I can't afford to take a break. If I was in a situation where I was a sole provider, we would have probably lost our apartment in June. You know, I'm very, very lucky and very grateful that my husband does have an amazing job, and that I have an amazing job, and I have amazing followers that help us out. If it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't have been able to do that emergency vet trip for Binks, because it was an emergency and we didn't have the funds at the time. And it really did save my cat. You know, I'm not just saying that. I am extremely grateful because it did. He had a terrible bladder infection, and he had some stress issues. Took him to the vet, got him medicine, and now he's fine. He's acting the way he used to. His stuff doesn't smell bad anymore. Because, oh my god, guys, that litter box smelled so bad. It was so bad. And he is getting his hair growing back from the spots that he would rip out, because he was so in like so much pain and so stressed that he was ripping out fur patches, and now they're nearly healed. If not for you guys, I don't know what we would have done. We would have had to wait to take him to the vet, which, you know, who knows what damage it could have done. And it's things like that where I'm extremely grateful to have this platform and to have this audience and to have people who listen, who care. And that's why I want to talk about this. Because I care. Because I care, and like I always say, when I make my videos, I make videos that I myself would have wanted to see. You know, and hearing people talk about mental health and hearing people talk about burnout, it's great. It is. But in the back of your mind, when you also know that person is a millionaire, it is a little harder. I'm not saying that their problems are less valid than mine. I'm not, because everybody takes experiences differently. But when there's someone who you know makes hundreds of thousands of dollars on YouTube, and then they're like, I'm just going to take a break for a month, you know that they're probably going to be okay. You know? But then if you have a random person on YouTube who's barely getting by and their YouTube money isn't even covering anything, so they just do it on their own time, you know, you take a break and then people forget about you. And it's irritating and it's upsetting and it's stressful and it adds more. And that's what I've learned. I used to be able to juggle a lot of things. But when I think about it, my a lot of things weren't a lot of things, you know? I used to be able to do, you know, commissions, YouTube, streaming, this and that, when I just had those things. But I have a lot more now. And it's things that I've wanted to do for such a long time, you know? But at the same time, I got overexcited. I bit off more than I can chew. And that's something that being self-employed, you're going to always learn. There's always a learning curve. Like I said, when summer would come around, those are my best months because I hate the heat. So I don't really go out in the summer. You know, I don't really go a lot of places in the summer. I like swimming, which I only recently got back into. I like the beach, but I don't like the heat, so I like going to the beach a couple of times a year with friends and a lot of sunscreen and, like, you know, provisions. But I don't really go out and do things because the heat makes me sick, and it's made me sick for years. You know, even back when I was at a low weight, it always made me bleh. So, time to draw, time to do this and that, time to play games, you know. And this summer, while being hard, is still hands down one of the best summers I've ever had. And the reason for that is because when I was in my bad place in June, people who have mental health problems understand when the bad thoughts come and how hard it is to talk yourself out of those bad thoughts. And so what I've had to start doing is I have to keep reminding myself where I am now compared to where I was. Doesn't stop the thoughts, but it does make it a little easier, at least for me. You know, I'm not in a toxic, abusive situation anymore. I can afford to have food in my stomach. I can afford to have air conditioning on, which sounds like such a silly thing, but it's a big deal. It's a really, really big deal. You know, I can afford to get clothes. I can afford to do this and that now. And things, yeah, they're tight, but we're not suffering. You know, and we had one fumble, one mess up, one emergency. And I'm very grateful that you guys helped us out with that. You know, you shouldn't rely on that, but I am very grateful. So that's why I'm not, I don't like, you know, when people just every month like clockwork stuff happens and they ask for more money. You know, I don't feel right with that. But I'm sitting here at the same time, I'm like, I took on too many zines. I took on too much NDA because I'm actually working on something with a friend that hopefully gets done. The artwork's done, but I legally can't share it until it is done on their end, you know? So I was working on that. I was working on con prep because my con is at the end of August. And then I was working on Patreon. And then I wanted to give back to some people. So I joined Art Fight at the tail end of it. And I started doing it as, like, you know, warm-ups where I'm just helping give things back to people because I think it is a great thing. And not sponsored by Art Fight, by the way. I wish, but no. You know, I want to give back because I care. I really, really care. And I am very grateful to have people like you guys in my life. And it's one of those things now that I've learned because you have to also look at the surroundings around you, okay? If you're having a hard time, but everyone else is having a hard time, then there's a common denominator there that isn't as odd as it might seem. You know, and some people are going to argue, because I've had people say, like, well, summer's always bad for influencers. And I'm like, but for me, it never was. For a lot of commission artists, it never was. You know, there are people who have been following for years who all of a sudden, out of nowhere, are making an online store, making a Patreon, making a coffee, making this and that, doing other things. And that's great if they actually want to do that. But at the same time, I'm sitting here like, I think everyone's doing bad right now. It's just a hard summer. you know? And I think it does have to come with the fact that people are doing more now, which is good. We need people to be doing more. We need people to being active more, so they're not on the computer. They're not as on their phone. They're not doing this and that, you know? And that's why it's also something you need to learn about being self-employed, is your income is constantly fluctuating. The market is constantly changing. And you need to be able to take what you learn and use it. So next year, now I know summers are going to be hard. I will need to prep in advance and do other things while summer comes around, so I don't, I don't work myself so hard, biting off so much more than I can chew, to where I'm behind now on everything else, and I'm so burnt out and I'm in so much pain that I have to actually go to the doctor, because I honestly thought that something was really wrong with my wrist and I had to go to the doctor, and it wasn't. It was, it was just stress. And I have to wear my brace more and my compression gloves more when I'm not working. But it's one of those things where, again, it's like, I was lucky enough that I could go to the doctor. I know not everybody has that. So some advice that I have that's helped me back when I couldn't afford to go to the doctor is listen to your body. Really listen to it. If all of a sudden out of nowhere you're getting back pain when you didn't before, listen to why. Maybe it's your bed. Obviously, not everyone can replace a bed, but you can do things to help fix your back. If your wrist is hurting like crazy and, you're doing stretches, you're doing everything, all the videos and all the pictures tell you, but you're still having issues, go to a pharmacy, go somewhere cheap. You can get compression gloves and a wrist brace for under $10. You can get a really nice one for like $30, but you can get one for under $10. And sleep with it on. When you're not working, when you're not drawing, when you're not doing stuff with your wrists or your hands, wear them. Wear them. They might feel a little weird at first, but oh my God, they help. They help so much. And, also learn that just because you used to be able to juggle 3 things doesn't mean you can juggle 6. Because that's what I learned. And I'm going to be doing better. I'm going to try to stop pushing myself so hard, because when I push myself so hard, I end up not really getting anything done. And that is the worst than just getting a little thing done. And that's all I really have to say about that, is pretty much don't bite off more than you can chew, drink lots of water, get sleep, be healthy, don't die. But look at what's around you and make sure that it's not just you. Like I said, if there are big artists that are all of a sudden doing things now that they didn't before, big YouTubers doing things now that they didn't before, there's probably a reason for it. And that's probably the market. That's something else you're going to have to learn if you want to be self-employed, is you're going to have to learn to go with the flow of the market. And I think that's all I got to say. So thanks for listening, guys. And as always, I will. See you next time. Bye.